Hey everybody, Mr. Musek here. Let's take a look at some more history about World War One, and so let's take a look at the United States. Now we talked about the U.S. And how they got involved in the fighting in Europe. And first off, they usually added very very slowly to the fighting. They didn't start right away because obviously they weren't ready for it. It was a brand new army, mostly all draftees and the Selective Service Act. First it served in reserve to British and French groups, and then eventually you had more and more arriving on a daily basis. Actually, a really good thing for this war effort. Now there were a lot of U.S. soldiers that fought in different battles. We have about 77,000 give or take that are killed in combat. But the impact was real big here. You have U.S. soldiers that are coming in, brand new, they're fresh, they're not tired, they haven't been fighting for 3 years, they aren't all driven down by morale. And so that new, fresh soldier coming in makes a big difference in trying to fight this conflict. You have 10,000 U.S. soldiers that were arriving daily in France every single day. They were fresh. You could back up tired British and French soldiers, and the extra manpower really allows the Allies to start pushing Germany back. And that's one of the things we see there. Now we do get notice one new type of injury. Now we didn't really talk about this so far, but the new idea is something called shell shock. Think about all things that are happening in those trenches. We did our trench simulation. You have those artillery shells that are bombing down on people, and because of that shelling, the constant shelling, sometimes it's really really loud. Um, the explosions, the sight of your friends getting blown up and killed and shot, that kind of stuff, people started just freaking out a little bit. It was really weird because these guys would sit there and they would be incapacitated. They have no actual injury. And so the worry is like, what's wrong with these guys? We'll start calling it shell shock. Today we might call it combat stress. We might call it PTSD today. Um, and for the soldiers returning home, they would freak out with loud bangs and fireworks and those kind of things. It would be quite a shocker for them. And so it's a new type of injury we see because of the war. Now at home, we start seeing some questions. The war is coming down to an end now. We had that great migration, and we're filling those jobs, the great migration of African Americans who come up north, northern cities to um, northern cities that they come north to take jobs, those kind of things. Start getting a little worried as the war comes to an end because you know what's going to happen when these white soldiers come back home. And so we start seeing this great migration again, just kind of thinking about what might happen going forward. A little bit of foreshadowing here. And we talk about the Western Front, where all the trench warfare was. Well, the Eastern Front. The Eastern Front was very, very different. Eastern Front was being fought in modern-day Poland area, Eastern Germany, Western Russia, Poland area, and there they didn't have trenches. There was no trench warfare going on there. It was actually open combat on the fields. Even used cavalry and horses at that point. On the Eastern Front, though, it was mostly Russians and Germans fighting with some Austro-Hungarians as well. And Russia was really getting the worst of it. Russia experienced close to 8 million casualties, dead and wounded in the course of the war. A lot of people. And as the Russian people start seeing this stuff, they start getting very unhappy over, the idea of so many people dying, of poor conditions, of no rights, those kind of things. And there's some trouble brewing in Russia. And we actually have a Russian Revolution in this time. So Russia is the only country fighting on the Eastern Front. They have 2 million dead in those 3 years. And the leader this time was that guy, Tsar Nicholas II, a Russian ruler, cousin of King George V. And people are very unhappy. In Russia, there are a series of class divisions. A very, 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 very big lower class and a very small upper class. And it's been that way for a long, long, long time in Russia, where the huge majority of people in Russia are lower class people. Now, a lot of people are unhappy with World War One. A lot of people wanted more political power, more say in stuff. Military soldiers dying. They didn't think the Tsar was running things right. And so some new ideas become popular, especially the ideas of communism and socialism. Now, communism was invented by Karl Marx in the 1840s, 1848 to be exact. And this idea is more or less the idea um, that people get what they need from the government. Everyone should be able to work, live equally. They should be able to get the amount of food they need, get the amount of work they need, and be paid. Sorry, guys. And pay the right amount of money to survive. The guy who leads this whole movement in Russia is a guy named Vladimir Ivanovich Lenin. V.I. Lenin, and his group was called the Bolsheviks. And after a civil war and a revolution and other civil wars, kind of things, the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, are in power in Russia, and they really want to end the war in Germany. They actually ran on a policy of three things. They said peace, land, and bread. They ran on. So one, we're going to make peace to the war, give everybody land, make sure everybody's fed. And so to make sure to keep that promise, they decided to, meet with Germany on their own, sign a treaty for Russia, and that way they get out of the war, even though they lost the most soldiers in the very end. But they do leave early, and we're going to see why that's a big deal in a few minutes here. So honestly, at that point, it's just the Western Front left, and that's it. So Germany is losing a lot of soldiers. They get a little bit of push after Russia. They start losing soldiers. With the United States at helping now, France and Britain are pushing more towards Germany. And then Germany is basically like, we can't win the war. We're not getting any more soldiers. More and more U.S. people are coming every single day. Eventually, Kaiser Wilhelm, the German king, decides to abdicate his throne. He literally just leaves, goes to the Netherlands, and leaves one of his advisors in charge, and that's about it. Basically leads to avoid capture and potential punishment from another country. Now, as the war comes to an end here in 1918, another thing starts racking the trenches. There's a huge worldwide flu epidemic that starts in the trenches of Europe and goes everywhere. As soldiers return home, they start bringing this strain of flu with them. Now, we've all had the flu. Flu's pretty nasty. Nobody likes it. This was a special strain of flu, a special mutated strain, one that people had never ever seen before. And because of this flu strain, it killed well over 20 million people worldwide. With about 500,000 or so died here in the United States. And so these soldiers came home from Europe. They came home carrying this flu bug with them, and then it started impacting everybody. The top picture is a military fort in Kansas, where they kept 6 soldiers. So that is also impacting us here as well. Right here in Wisconsin, Sauk Prairie, you saw how it was the same kind of deal was going on here. Places were quarantined. That means they actually closed down public areas to make sure young people weren't allowed out. Kids weren't allowed out of their houses. It was a very, very big deal here in terms of this flu, which we'll be looking at in class. Now, eventually, we get to 11th month, 11th day, 11th hour. So November 11th, 11 o'clock in the morning, Paris time, Germany, France, Britain, U.S. signed the official ceasefire between the Allies and the Central Powers. Later on, this is known as Armistice Day, and then now becomes Veterans Day. They celebrate this because you had 4 years of the worst fighting ever, and now it's over, thank God. And now you have a battered country you got to try and fix and repair and make all those things better. So a peace treaty that gets signed here is called the Treaty of Versailles. The Allies and the Central Powers, they meet in the Versailles Palace just outside of Paris. And when we do the discussions, it's kind of weird though, because here's the people that are there. From France, you have Georges Clemenceau. And every single those people comes with an agenda, if you will. There's something that each person wants to get out of this whole deal here. So, yeah, George Clemenceau, who's looking to get land, basically. They want France wants to get Alsace-Lorraine. They want to get the Rhineland parts of Germany, very, very coal rich. More colonies would be good too. In England, you have Prime Minister David Lloyd George from England. His whole goal: limit France. You don't want France to get too powerful, and make sure Britain keeps the empire. If anything else, maybe expand to Britain's empire a little bit. Italy was there too. Italy had changed sides halfway through the war and joined with the Allies. Victorio Orlando was there. He was just kind of there. Didn't really do much. And lastly, the United States was there with Woodrow Wilson. Funny part, Woodrow Wilson, first ever president to visit Europe. He sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, went to Europe. First time a sitting president had ever gone and toured Europe before. And we'll kind of look at how it kind of changes a lot of things as well because of that. He brought a peace plan with him called his 14 points, basically a way to avoid any and all future wars. So here are some examples of his 14 points. First off, he wanted places to make open alliances, have open covenants of peace, basically saying that we aren't going to have secret alliances anymore that are going to cause little wars to become big wars. He wanted freedom of navigation, so basically no more unrestricted submarine warfare. If you're a neutral party, you can go trade with whoever heck you want to trade with. You want to see national arms brought down a little bit. You want to see a way so that countries didn't have these huge armies anymore that they were running around with. You want to see Russia evacuate German territory, French areas become free, get away from Germany. All the little different ethnic groups in Austria-Hungary get their freedom, create a Poland, and also have some kind of association of nations to help keep the peace going forward. These are kind of the 14. They're examples of the 14 points that Wilson here brings. So obviously these guys are there and they have all these things they want to have happen. They come all these big goals for their countries and for what they want to get. But obviously you guys know what you want. What you really get are two completely and totally different things. Here's what really happens. Well, first happens to Germany. And notice, by the way, notice who was not at the peace treaty. Yeah, Germany wasn't there, right? Okay. Germany has signed something called the guilt clause. They have to take complete and total blame for all of World War One. Think about it. Did they start it? No. Okay, but they had to take all the blame for it. So it's kind of this big, almost like kind of this moral, kind of this emotional kind of gut check to Germany that they had to take all the blame for World War One. Also, Kaiser Wilhelm, the German king, he had to be tried as a war criminal for starting everything and for crimes against morality, essentially, with Belgium and that kind of stuff. So Germany gets blamed for the war. They have to pay what are called reparations. These are basically fines for the war. So they have to pay for all the war damage everywhere. All damage to buildings, price of a life, cities, farms, all those kind of things. Ends up being 226 billion Reichmarks. In theory, they'd be paying it off until 2020. They paid it off about 25 years ago, actually. Also, things like coal, iron had to go to Britain, France, Italy to help pay back all different things that were damaged during World War One. Land-wise, Germany lost all of its colonies. They're divided between Britain and France. Poland was made from eastern parts of Germany and parts of Russia. By the way, who else wasn't at the peace treaty? Russia. Go figure. Okay. France got little bits of Germany. Honestly, Germany lost tens of thousands of square miles of land to the new countries that are made out of this. We have nationalism. So we start seeing little ethnic groups again get their own countries. So most of Austria-Hungary is broken up and turned into little different countries of different ethnic groups. So we see Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Yugoslavia, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Austria, and Hungary all become their own little countries. Finland is made out of Russia as well. And so we see these new developments come out here. So here's our map, 1914. Here's our map, 1918. Very, very different look in Europe now because of this peace treaty. Military restrictions, okay? Germany cannot have a big military anymore. They can only have a small army, about 100,000 soldiers, a small navy. They aren't allowed to have any kind of submarines whatsoever. They had to make this big, almost like a militarized zone between Germany and France. They couldn't have things like gas or tanks, armored cars, armored planes, those kind of things at all in their army whatsoever. So basically, they kind of almost take the teeth, you will, or declaw Germany, if you will, if you would a cat. Also, the goal is to create something called the League of Nations. Basically, a big international organization with one job. Make sure that wars don't happen. They go through and disarm countries, make sure treaties are observed. If countries are arguing, they would find a way to fix the argument without necessarily, having a war take place. The problem is that League of Nations has no army. Instead, their job was to ask the member countries to volunteer their armies. This was really Wilson's major point. He wanted to make sure this organization happened and was going to prevent a few wars. Now, in the end, there's actually a big debate in the United States about whether or not the United States should sign the treaty. And the biggest issue was with the idea of that League of Nations. U.S. saw the damage. Not obviously not much of the damage happened here. I heard the stories from soldiers of gas attacks, injuries, live loss, equipment, and that all this stuff was happening far, far away. And wondering, hey, if we sign this treaty, are we going to get sucked into another war later on? And so the treaty was actually not ratified by Congress. We do not sign the treaty until we sign separate treaties. And a big reason was that League of Nations. We did not want to get, as they said back then, sucked into another war. And they feared that the United States is going to basically be called on to fix all the world's problems. We want to be neutral, stay out of it. So overall, we do have the League of Nations, but without the United States. Woodrow Wilson is going to spend most of his life trying to get the rest of his next year or so trying to get the U.S. into the League of Nations, but it doesn't happen. In fact, his last year in office, he has a stroke and does not really run for re-election. He's kind of, after he has a stroke, he's really, really limited, and people think his wife ran the show. And that brings us to the 1920s, and that's the last little bit of World War I. Thanks, everybody. Make sure you're done for Monday.